This is the Good Government Podcast with Aaron Slutkin and Michael Hoffpauir.
But I was thinking about our readings in terms of the never tell anyone outside of the family what you're thinking line from Godfather. And it's a little bit rough to apply it here, but the lesson I would say is in Federalists 6, 7, and 8, the necessity of union to keep us safe from internal faction or dissension. 3, 4, and 5, we need the union to keep us safe from outside forces. And so either which way, I think Don Corleone would agree. You need union. You need the family to be strong and united, even if inside of it, during deliberations, we disagree about whether or not we should get into this new economic venture that's being offered by a man in that scene. The importance of union. Simple in speech, by no means simple in deed. So, Aaron, how you doing? What you thinking?
I'm doing well. I think Publius does want us to think of Americans as a family. And number two, families, what are they? They're united by the same ancestors. They're groups of people generally sharing the same habits, customs, mores, certainly language. You should never forget when talking about the Federalist, and especially about these papers that talk about disunion, what the causes for union are. We have the common history of settlement, the American Revolution binding together the people of the different colonies, the Articles of Confederation, which we found out are not practicable to keep this family united, and now proposed Constitution. Let's start with number 6, written by Publius.
Yeah, so a wonderful paper. I'm just going to say this most likely at the beginning of every paper. A wonderful paper. The purpose of this paper is to demonstrate the necessity of the Union to prevent internal wars. I would go so far as to say the necessity of the Union to prevent the worst of wars, civil wars. Union now looks really, really important and really, really good in a way that I didn't quite sense, let's say, in Fed 3, 4, 5, when I was just worried about the mean old Brits coming back, or what was happening on our western, or could happen on our western borders. So here we have Publius say the following in the second sentence. I'm going to read, I shall now proceed to delineate dangers of a different and perhaps still more alarming kind, those which will, in all probability, flow from dissensions between the states themselves and from domestic factions and convulsions. These have been already, in some instances, slightly anticipated, but they deserve a more particular and more full investigation. How is it that we might investigate them? Why are they deserving of it? I think those are two questions that we could pull from it. Foremost, they're deserving of it because what's going to happen are dissensions between the state, domestic factions, and convulsions. We better figure this out because civil war is going to happen. But how are we going to investigate this?
Can I ask you, you say that civil war is the worst kind of war.
Yeah, that's Plato. I'm thinking of the laws when I say that. And I'm also thinking of course, the American Civil War or the Spanish Civil War. I'm just thinking of brother against brother. I'm thinking about the danger of proximity, enmity being bred by proximity. And so I can look at Plato's laws and make this argument. Then I can just make it by looking at the contemporary landscape of the world. Yeah, it's the worst kind.
Reminds me of a moment in Shakespeare's Henry VI, Part 3. There's the longest stage direction in Shakespeare. Enter a father carrying the body of his son, and enter a son carrying the body of his father. And I think one of the reasons Publius will say that this is the worst kind of war, or imply it, is because civil war, I think he thinks, is avoidable.
Well, can we also
at least?
Yeah, sure. Well, we hope that we can create institutions and also an education, I would add, that will avoid this. But I want to go back to the language we were using of family as another reason why it's bad. And I think that's what you were just pointing to. We would add the language from Fed 14 of kindred blood. So it's one thing to see two men fight on 6th Street in Austin on a Thursday night outside a bar aptly called Poor Choices. But what if they're brothers? What's all the more worrisome about that or troubling about that? And I think that's something you're getting at, is you're seeing, wait a minute, this is kindred blood. These are people who have a shared interest, who should have a shared understanding of the good or a common good between them, as opposed to being alien to each other, and therefore not having a shared understanding of mutual interest or the good is shared between them. So that's another way, I think, in which civil war is so absolutely morally troubling, in addition to just the violence of it all.
There's a sense of betrayal that accompanies civil war and the breaking up of the civic family that can tend to make war more violent, and furthermore, just a sense of tragedy that accompanies brother fighting brother. We can think of so many moments in our Civil War where Union is taking a hill, Confederacy is taking a hill, and the men standing on the top of it are begging them to stop coming, not because they are terrified for their own lives, but because brother does not want to take brother's life. And we know it was a terribly vitriolic war, but it also was, in that highest sense, tragedy.
That was very serious, and I think right. And if we pull away from it too, it's one thing to say, well, it's the worst kind of war, and therefore you want to avoid it because you want to avoid the worst things. But aside from that pit that you just described, you want to avoid war, period, out of your longing for security. We have to get this right. So we have to look at how it is that we're going to investigate the matter. Now, you and I have understood why it is that this is deserving of our more particular investigation. How are we going to investigate it? Paragraphs 2 and 3 of Federalist 6 are fantastic. I'm just going to read a little bit. Paragraph 2. If these states should either be wholly disunited or united in partial confederacies, a man must be far gone in utopian speculations who can seriously doubt that the subdivisions into which they might be thrown would have frequent and violent contests with each other. To presume a want of motives for such contests as an argument against their existence would be to forget that men are ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. To look for a continuation of harmony between a number of independent, unconnected sovereignties situated in the same neighborhood would be to disregard the uniform course of human events and to set at defiance the accumulated experience of ages.
Yeah, that's a comment about human nature that is going to always lead men to seek war, or at least conflict with one another. And the Union for now might be a dike or dam meant to preserve the Union against the worst things in human nature, but we'll see pretty quickly that we cannot count on the current Union to be able to prevent that kind of war. Next, we see the causes of hostility among nations, which flow from those facts about human nature. We'll add to our list. There are some which have a general and almost constant operation upon the collective bodies of society. Of this description are the love of power, or the desire of preeminence and dominion, the jealousy of power, or the desire of equality and safety. There are others which have a more circumscribed, though an equally operative influence within their spheres. Such are the rivalships and competitions of commerce between commercial nations. And then we move to private passions, which are not less numerous than anything we've yet seen. The attachments, enmities, interests, hopes, and fears of leading individuals in the communities of which they are members. And then we see great men of this class, favorites of a king or a people, we might think demagogues, assuming the pretext of some public motive, who are willing to sacrifice the national tranquility to personal advantage or personal gratifications.
I think it's worth dwelling for just a second to explore ambition, vindictiveness, and rapacity, and how it is that they're problems, and why it is that we would dismiss those who think that there can be peace between disunited states or only partially confederated states. Why are we dismissing that as utopian, as nowhere? Utopian speculation. So that means it's unreasonable. I'm just sticking here with paragraph 2. A reasonable understanding of human beings and also of history. Human beings make history according to their actions. And here their actions issue from their nature. He says men are. He doesn't say men can be. He says men are. So this is Aaron Slutkin. This is Mike Hoffpauir. This is John Smith. This is Jane Smith. From here to eternity, men are ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. So what does it mean for a man to be ambitious? It means he wants more. It means he wants to move up. It means that he wants to acquire. He's not settled or content. We don't have to move into Tocquevillian restlessness here. This is sown in us to want more. And finally, you would say, well, look, Machiavelli says that, but Machiavelli also admits that people just want to be left alone and secure in their property. But if you're building a government, you better steer clear of utopian speculations. You better put safety nets everywhere, and you should start with the understanding of human beings as possessing the capacity and desire to acquire what they don't have. And in the case here, it can be property, it can be power. It doesn't matter. Those two things are going to lead us to fight with each other. Vindictive? Guess what? Your ambition just led you to take stuff from me. To stick with our friend Machiavelli, a man will sooner forgive the death of a father than the loss of a patrimony. So you better fear my vindictive nature. And it could just simply be that I hate the fact that you've acquired something. Like I could look at you and say, who is that guy to think that he's cock of the walk, an old turn of phrase. So it could be that you've directly harmed me, or just simply that I'm vindictive against you acquiring something because I'm ambitious. Then finally, rapacious. It's never going to stop. I just want more and more and more and more. There's a sort of heat and movement. Is it too much, Aaron, to say violence about man?
When thinking about the movement toward causes of war between the states, number 7 is going to discuss political causes. We're going to talk about the public debt. We're going to talk about Western lands, reasons that the states could go. But we notice here that Publius is starting with facts about human nature and then addressing causes of hostility that are going to lead to war. But always at back of this, we should remind ourselves, we can resolve the questions of Western land. We can create a rule for the apportionment of public debt. These causes, he says, always will be with us. As you know, you and I both are ambitious, and so are both of our mothers.
So what about, and then the fun thing to say is, Aaron, with the last point you've made, isn't this Publius? Sure. So it's not just mean old Brutus, the anti-federalist. Publius is a human being. So he's ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. How can he escape the danger here? Especially because Publius is involved in politics. And as we move into paragraph 3 of number 6, we see now man in politics. We see man who has this nature in politics because states are but conglomerations of men. It's a collective, but the collective is still made up of the individuals who possess these qualities. They're on now a macro level, even running hotter and less reasonably than they might on the individual level. When we move up into the political realm and see man in politics, we see the love of power on display, the desire for preeminence and dominion. So that's all my ambition at work. My desire for preeminence, to stand above everyone else, and also dominion, to dominate, to control them, to have them subservient to me. The jealousy of power. Now, we have to think about jealousy in a little bit more complex manner than we might immediately think of it. It's not just, I'm jealous of you for having shiny new wheels on your car. It's not that I'm just jealous that you have power. It is also that I have power and I am jealous of it myself. I'm a jealous guard of it. So people can have power and then also, because of having it, be led to a state of violence, distrustfulness, paranoia, etc. Because this is the most important thing. Sorry to say it, it's your precious. So jealousy of power can operate on you looking at me as the person who has power, me as the person who has power, and therefore looks at you as somebody who wants to take my power. And now we're just in a situation of animosity. There you go. There's war right there, rooted in our nature as ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. All we're seeing it now is operating not merely on the street, but in the political arena. Finally, the desire for equality and safety. So that's really strange, because now here's the human being who Machiavelli admitted just wants to be left alone and secure in his persons and property, to use my language. So We want all of this power. We're jealous about it. We want preeminence and dominion. And we also just, on the other hand, we want equality. This is what Machiavelli talks about in The Prince. It's really funny to see it just right here. It's between the great and the people. And that's what we're seeing. The great who want to dominate and those who don't want to be dominated. It's right here in Fed 6. The desire of equality and safety. So the cause of hostility can be my desire to tyrannize over you or dominate you. Or the cause of hostility can be that which prompted the American Revolutionary War. The desire of equality and safety in that equality. Some of the causes, let's say, are more noble than others. But you have to account for both, lest you fall into utopian speculation. Just because you want equality and safety doesn't mean that you're right. Yeah, I want equality. What makes you think we don't have it? You can't just say equality is simply a always correct justification.
Equality in what? Grounded in what? What are the principles to which you're appealing?
You could be mistaken. These are lovely paragraphs. And as we move down to the private passions bit, the attachments, enmities, interests, hopes, and fears of leading individuals, we have Pericles and his attachment to some prostitute. What a rough treatment of Pericles here in Federalist 6. One of the most, one of the greatest statesmen ever to live is propelled into war by a prostitute, Publius points out. Attachments, the hatreds, a.k.a. enmities, the interests, those interests are private interests. As we will soon see, you can't do away with those. The hopes, that's interesting, and fears of leading individuals. Their hope, maybe their hope to attain power or acquire something, their fear of losing what they have or not having it. Here we're treating causes, or are we treating effects? It seems as if this is sown into the nature of man. And Publius is offering us an education regarding this nature of man, but is he trying to cut this out of human beings? Ambition, vindictiveness, rapacity, the desire for equality and safety, the jealousy of power. Is he trying to cure us of this as a utopian? Or is he trying to offer us a way of controlling its effects through union?
So he gives us a tolerable knowledge of human nature in paragraph 7. That's what he calls what he has just supplied us. And we've noted that there is a trinity among...
Yeah, that's paragraph 7, right? Those who have a tolerable knowledge of human nature. Okay, I see where you are.
And we've noticed that there's a trinity of causes of war. The first is those facts about human nature. Men are ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. The second are facts about political societies, that jealousy of power, desire, inequality of safety, etc., lead to war. And then the third part of the trinity are how private passions operate in politics. Why this diversion? And here Publius is going to take direct aim at perpetual peace. We're going to move on in paragraph 8 to really try to disprove the utopian sentiments in Publius's words that lead men to argue that peace between nations is possible. And here I'll quote him. Yes.
Well, one point. Before we even get there, this feeds directly into what you're arguing. But Publius says, the examples I'm going to offer you, Pericles, Henry VIII, show that you don't solve this by way of regime type, whether it is a democracy or whatever you want me to call Athens. Under Pericles or a monarch, this can happen. You have the leading human beings with their private interests who play court to the people, or you have leading human beings with their private interests who play court to the king. I'm just saying, prior to getting to this full visionary component where you're taking us, you don't solve this problem by changing your regime. It's sown into the nature of men. You don't control for the effect of this just by switching regime type. There has to be another feature.
Well, like you say, you anticipate that we must make government control the governed and oblige it to control itself. But we'll get there.
Yeah, because men administer regimes. It's still human beings in the driver's seat. You aren't changing that fact. All regimes suffer from the same proclivities. All even have a lust for imperialism, I would suggest, given what we've seen here in their foreign policies. They all have a lust for imperialism in their foreign policy because it lies in the hearts of men. Yeah. So A tolerable knowledge of human nature is also a very realist view of human nature. So what are you going to do about it?
Well, certainly not count on peace. So we're going to move to the paradox of perpetual peace, as he says in paragraph 8. I'm going to read for a moment from paragraph 17. Have we not already seen enough of the fallacy and extravagance of those idle theories which have amused us with promises of an exemption from the imperfections, weaknesses, and evils incident to society in every shape? There, it doesn't matter the type of regime, as you said, Mike. Is it not time to awake from the deceitful dream of a golden age and to adopt as a practical maxim for the direction of our political conduct that we, as well as the other inhabitants of the globe, are yet remote from the happy empire of perfect wisdom and perfect virtue? Will we ever get there?
Not so long as we remain human, according to Publius. Look at all of this notions of peace as we see developed in paragraph 8 now. To move from this wonderful point in paragraph 17, we go back to paragraph 8. But notwithstanding the concurring testimony of experience in this particular, there are still to be found visionary or designing men. Visionary is not good. Or designing men who stand ready to advocate the paradox of perpetual peace between the states, though dismembered and alienated from each other. The genius of a republic, say they, is pacific. The spirit of commerce has a tendency to soften the manners of men and to extinguish those inflammable humors which have so often kindled into wars. Commercial republics like ours will never be disposed to waste themselves in ruinous contentions with each other. They will be governed by mutual interests and will cultivate a spirit of mutual amity and concord. This is an argument against Montesquieu, to be sure, regarding commerce and peace. I think it's against Hume as well, regarding commerce and peace. I think it's against Kant on a notion of perpetual peace, and against the Scottish Enlightenment, generally speaking, regarding the softening effect of commerce, smoothing over of mores and differences. All of this view that neighbors can't be trusted is a view adopted from our, quote, tolerable knowledge of human nature that you and I have been discussing thus far. Now, to return to your opening statement about how different this paper feels from some other papers, look at how low this is. Now Publius is arguing against all of this Enlightenment stuff. Publius is arguing overtly against modern political thought. This is a low view of human beings that we get here in Fed 6. A low view to where you rightly can say, are we ever going to get to perfect wisdom and perfect virtue? And you have to say no. Well, in this context, it's because we are thinking of human beings at their worst in order to attack this view of progress, this view that commerce is good and that we don't need union. Commerce can be good, but we need union. Commerce will only make wars worse because it provides what? An object for our love of gain. It's going to fuel our ambition. It's going to fuel our rapacity, our jealousy of power, our desire to dominate. Don't you want to dominate the market, Aaron? Corner it? I do too. And I also think that's really good. I think it's an engine that drives ingenuity. It's rooted in freedom and our ability to do things. It's at the heart of this project. So that's why it is we have to understand that Publius is going to look at things differently and speak about them differently depending on the context. So 6 is a part, I think, of what's been started since Federalist 2, gained a whole bunch of speed in Federalists 3 through 5. And it's a part of the effort to cure the excessive confidence people have, in particular the anti-Federalists have, in Republican government. The anti-Feds think Republican government is all you need. You just get the regime right, it doesn't matter. They think, oh, if you get a Republican government, it's going to be easy. It's going to be easy because everybody's going to be close to each other and also trading commercially with each other. Therefore, no great precautions are needed. In fact, no great men are needed. You aren't even going to need statesmen. It's just going to work. It's self-propelling once you just build the institution of a Republican government and allow people to trade. The anti-Feds, to be very clear, think that peace and commerce go hand in hand and are also a natural consequence of Republican government. Now, Fed 6 is really interesting. It's really interesting now because Publius says no. Republican government wherein there is great trade and commerce, is not going to make peace. Auxiliary precautions are needed. The Articles of Confederation and our experience with them is proof in the pudding of this argument. Like how I said pudding and not pudding, excuse me. Excuse my language there. This modern utopian sentiment of the anti-feds is going to kill us all or lead us to kill each other.
And I think there's a suggestion here, too, of something we're going to see in the 20th century. And I'm thinking specifically here about an argument Churchill makes in his history of the Second World War, that republics or democracies are going to be more warlike than monarchies, or at least are going to wage a more vitriolic kind of war. Why? Because the people are behind the war. Are not popular assemblies, he says, and he is Publius, not Churchill, are not popular assemblies frequently subject to the impulses of rage, resentment, jealousy, avarice, and other irregular and violent propensities? Sure, that a few individuals in whom the assembly places confidence are going to be tinctured by the passion, or the assembly will be tinctured by the passions and views of those individuals. But there's something in the character, in the nature of republics, that's going to lead to war, and more terrible war at that. The democratic war is going to be a species of war unleashed like we have never seen.
And at the same time, again, to stick with our theme, I apologize for moving away. Golly, paragraph 9 is where it's incredible. But to say, isn't Republican government the solution to our problems once we get into Fed 9 and Fed 10 and so forth? Yeah, the answer is yes. It's just going to be a new understanding of Republican government. It's going to be a form of Republican government that is synonymous with good government and is completely unfamiliar to the anti-Feds and the men of antiquity. And so here, again, why are we attacking Republican government and monarchy and saying even democracy or Republican government is going to be worse? Because we're making an argument for union. And I need you to understand union, and eventually we're going to show you how it is. Union also needs Republican government to make union work once you're sold on the necessity of union. So the argument's a lot more complicated than we might hope. Hey, what do you know? It's politics. It's hard. It's complicated. And that's another thing that I would suggest whom Publius is attacking here don't understand. They don't understand politics because they don't understand men, and they aren't capable of educating us. They just think that this stuff's going to drive itself. You just get this. All you got to do is just all we need is this new bond and this new property tax, and we're going to solve the problem of the unhoused people in our city. No, there's deeper problems here. I would argue personally, if I may digress and talk about something unrelated. The anti-Feds, I think, are offering an anti-political perspective. I think the visionary and designing men or the anti-Feds are offering an anti-political or unpolitical perspective. I think is utopian. And I think those who would hope for perfect wisdom and perfect virtue, as we see at the end of paragraph 17, are guilty of the same charge.
And we might wonder if, as you foreshadow, the answer is a republic, but a new kind of republic. The answer is a reliance on Fed 9, the new political science. Well,
or improved.
Why is Publius not a visionary himself? And as you know, visionary there is not a compliment. Sometimes we talk about visionary leaders. Here, Publius has all kinds of wonderful names for visionaries. My favorite is projectors in politics. Talk about the fallacy and extravagance of those idle theories. And of course, some of these visionaries are not visionaries. They're simply designing. They are the demagogues. They are men of private motives.
Yeah, look how dangerous hope is. Look at how dangerous hope is now, because the designing men who are visionaries about where it is we need to go, who are also have visions, imaginations of who human beings can be and what politics can be and what can bring it about. These saint-seeming deceivers, to quote that wonderful, forgive me for not having it at the tip of my tongue, but it's in the point of departure in Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Yeah, no, what are visionaries? They don't have common sense. They're denying what's before them, human nature and who human beings are. Yeah, visionary is a dirty word. And at the same time, as you said, doesn't Publius have a vision?
But the difference here is that Publius will say his is rooted in even in the experience.
Very good. That's right.
And he even, and it's lovely, personifies experience, the testimony of experience. History will proclaim that their visions of perpetual peace are utopian, extravagant, surely dangerous, paradoxical.
His study of men in history produces his realism. I don't know why I keep thinking of Machiavelli when I read the Federalist Papers. It's as if this has a distinctly Machiavellian sobriety about it regarding who human beings are. And it doesn't have to be that I'm out here ready to kill off entire bloodlines and claim a new state for myself. It can be that I'm actually trying to secure what I have out of my love of equality and safety. And therefore, this realism is just at home with the two of us who love equality and safety. So, yeah, this is a wonderful paper. You know, he moves also at the experience that you're talking about to show how he's not a visionary. It doesn't matter. Publius is going to show you his chops regarding his knowledge of history and men as well, men who make history, by looking at different regimes and also different time periods. Moderns and ancients are guilty of all of this. And it's not, you don't even want to say they're guilty. You just want to say it's who we are. So the ancients, he's mentioned Rome at the end of 5, but he's going to tell us we shouldn't compare America to these old republics. It's interesting. This is paragraphs 10 and following. Those were cities of standing armies. All men were soldiers. America's commercial. So there's a little bit of a contradiction here. And it seems as if this contradiction is somewhat consistent throughout the Federalists. The point, though, if I may try and wrestle with this contradiction of saying they had standing armies back in antiquity, we're commercial, whereas they had men who were soldiers, we have men who are manufacturers and traders. The point is not that republics simply are, as a matter of fact, more peaceful. The point, I think, that Publius is making is that a properly constructed republic, what you've pointed to in Federalist 9 with the 5 improvements in political science, republics properly designed can be more peaceful. 3, 4, and 5 show us that we need a strong union to prevent wars. 6, 7, and 8 say we need a strong union to prevent internal wars, external, internal. So there you go. There's your properly designed republic. It's a regime type who has as its feature the land it occupies and the union as a component of its patriotism, of its love of fatherland, as what it's fighting for, as its interest. And that's a deeper part, I think, of Publius's civic education here. So if you prepare for all of human nature, the wonderful, kind, caring, charitable Aaron Slutkin, and the rapacious, resentful, ambitious Mike Hoffpauir, if you prepare for all of that and you hope to contend with and even utilize all of it, you can have a more peaceful government than any which offers us a utopian vision or is framed on a narrow understanding as opposed to a more comprehensive understanding of human capacities and nature. Republican government itself in the end is not enough. You need union. Fed 6, man, Federalist Papers.
Well, every time we come on, we end up aiming to take a bigger chunk than we do, right? But then you start talking about Fed 6, you start getting into human nature and experience, and why not to be lulled asleep or even seduced by perpetual peace. There are 2 instances of seduction in this essay.
Can you point them out to me? Yeah.
Sure. So the second one is going to be in the end.
So it's paragraph 17.
In paragraph 17, from the summary of what has taken place in other countries, whose situations have borne the nearest resemblance to our own, mind you, not the republics of antiquity, but the modern commercial nations. What reason can we have to confide in those reveries which would seduce us into an expectation of peace and cordiality between the members of the present confederacy and a state of separation? And that bookends with the other example of seduction, that of the celebrated Pericles and his prostitute. We don't want to be personally gratified by the deceivers, by the visionaries. We don't want to be stimulated by them. No, instead, we have to rest ourselves in facts of human nature and experience.
And then we have, in addition to this, we have seduce us in 17. We can be lulled asleep. At the very, I believe this is the ultimate paragraph. That's correct. It's paragraph 19. This is the concluding paragraph of Federalist 6. So far is the general sense of mankind from corresponding with the tenets of those who endeavor to lull asleep our apprehensions of discord and hostility between the states. In the event of disunion, that it has from long observation of the progress of society become a sort of axiom in politics, that vicinity, nearness of situation, constitutes nations' natural enemies. So we must add to these other aspects of human nature the axiom. Proximity breeds enmity. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Proximity makes it hard and filled with a hate, at least when it comes to politics. Doesn't union look better? Lulled to sleep regarding our apprehensions. Don't worry about it. It's okay.
And then you wake up and you're at war with your neighbors.
Yeah, you wake up and your house has been set on fire by some dude wearing a funny coat. I can't remember if it's in Livy, but he's speaking of Nero. And he says, imagine suffering the indignity of being burned alive by a man wearing flip-flops. And of course, flip-flops is, of course, the sandals. Let's say sandals. But it's just, Nero just like in his morning bathrobe, just burning Christians to light his garden because he's up early or hasn't gone to bed yet. The indignity of this. If I may, I'm going to make one more point here. Now, note that Publius does not say this is the only nature of man. He says all men, but it doesn't mean that it's exhaustive, this understanding of our ambition, our vindictiveness, and our rapaciousness. He doesn't say that that's exhaustive of human nature. Again, there's that other bit, we could desire equality and safety. So there might be something else in us. So again, 6, in context, I'm making a certain argument. As a good orator or rhetorician or teacher, I'm tailoring my argument to suit my purposes and also to the dispositions and challenges posed by my audience. So Publius does aim low. He says these terrible things about us, or at least points out these terrible things about us, our ambition, our vindictiveness, and our rapacity. But that's not the only nature of man. He does not say this, nor does he answer. He's got a series of rhetorical questions throughout number 6, which he does not answer. Another way of reading 6 also would be, look at all the rhetorical questions. Well, what does a rhetorical question do to you as a person who's the target of these rhetorical questions? It leads you to think about them on your own, given the premises as established by the orator who's posing the questions to you. Now, we're going to see a lot of other statements in our study of the Federalist Papers regarding human nature. And those other understandings of human nature will seem to contradict what's established here in 6. But it's not flatly contradicted. For instance, like Fed 55. You could argue that the discrepancy is between the various authors. You could say, look, that's Hamilton, that's Madison. Hamilton's a meanie bobini who thinks worse of human beings. Madison's a more optimistic fella. I'm going to stick with what I brought to the table, context, context, context. Because if I'm making an argument to you about the House of Representatives doing a good job in meeting your interests, I'm not going to lean into the fact that all men are by nature ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. I'm going to lean into the fact that human beings are grateful, an argument that we'll see in 57, and that they're bound by gratitude. Now, how much you believe that and think that that's right, good. That's up to you. But depending on the situation, Publius is going to pull on that face of man. He's going to show that side or face of man to the audience as will function inside of his institution. And the reason why I think you and I can start to believe in this is because we know Publius is never satisfied with just one precaution. There's never just one thing to take care of us. It's not just hands 10 and 2. You're going to be safe if your hands are at 10 and 2 on the wheel. It's like, no, your car has anti-lock brakes, state-of-the-art tires, etc. You just keep building in safety nets and precautions to make Republican government good government, to make human beings who are commercial creatures in this regime, who are ambitious creatures, or who also want to be left alone, to make them into good citizens in this regime. Publius is not simply modern. He might have this hard-nosed view of man, as we see in Fed 6, that I've at least said man. I sure am thinking a lot about Machiavelli today in this paper. But it also has an understanding that education matters, civic education matters, that there's something higher about the citizen than just a mere bourgeois morality, as we might see developed in Hobbes or maybe even in Locke. There's something also possible, a sort of duty in the Fed papers that are going to be a part of the institutions and what's required to maintain the institutions. That's why I'm really excited to get into the double digits, especially once we get past 37.
So what does this paper, in concluding, teach us? Well, it teaches us that we can't simply declare a republic and expect not to go to war with our neighbors. We can't expect perpetual peace. It teaches us to trust experience. It teaches us to not think that commerce is going to soften our morals and our habits. And that commerce, too, can be a cause of war and often historically has been. And it teaches us, again, unsurprisingly, given what our aim is in these early papers, to trust a union, to not abandon it, to seek union. And so in the next paper, in our next conversation, we're going to discuss papers that are going to warn us about, one, what the causes of dissension might be that could lead to war between disunited states, what might lead Connecticut and New Jersey and New York or Maryland or Virginia to seek war against one another, and then in particularly how terrible those wars would be for our Republican government, for our liberties.
Did you see the movie Civil War?
I didn't, but I was thinking about that. I saw that clip, what kind of American are you?
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Oh yeah, it's well, I love that guy's movies. He did Ex Machina. I'm in the minority of thinking the movie called Men is incredible. I think it's a beautiful film. He did a movie called Annihilation. That's fantastic. He's also written some stuff that's come on TV that's okay. A show called Devs. It's Gardner. But it's good.
I've seen one of his, or I've seen 28 Days Later, of course.
He wrote that.
Yeah. Writing. Okay. I see now.
Yeah, but still, I mean, you're getting some similar kind of movies. I thought Civil War was an amazing action movie, suspense action movie. I think Kirsten Dunst continues just to make great movies. I mean, Melancholia, she's incredible in Melancholia.
I should watch this because one of the things I didn't bring up when we were talking about this is we keep entertaining the possibility of this. It's always in the back of our heads.
There's a complete loss of humanity and man turning against man through the mutated sense of zombie films. I mean, all of these things put us in a state of nature. And one of the key features of state of nature is trying to claw our way into civilization. And so when we look at Civil War, we watch the breakdown of society, but also even in this movie, Civil War, you realize at the end that all they have to do is kill the president and then they're going to rebuild society. Civil War is great. The tension in the movie is incredible. The acting is fantastic. It also reminded me a bit of, what's it called? Something of Men. Human beings can't have babies.
I don't know this one.
Clive Owen is in it. What's it called? Children of Men. It has a Children of Men. It's real interesting. Yeah, you should check that movie out. All right. Well, what you doing today?
This has been the Good Government Podcast with Aaron Slutkin and Michael Hoffpauir.